And of course, we are following the latest developments, whatever they may be, and there weren't that many today on Capitol Hill, where Republicans and Democrats remain at a standstill, and day 2 of the government shutdown carries on. Joining me now, congressional reporter for Semafor, Eleanor Mueller, and national political reporter for The Hill, Julia Manchester. Julia, you are focused on the relative cohesion and coherence of the Democratic messaging in this shutdown. How do you evaluate it thus far?
Well, it's been interesting to see, I think, how Democrats have been rolling out the message. They're unified in obviously opposing the shutdown, but they have a very different strategy. So, for example, yesterday, the Democratic National Committee got a lot of pushback for a cat meme video they put out on TikTok explaining the shutdown. A number of Democrats sort of saying that it was dumbing down the situation.
Trivializing something important.
Exactly. But then you had, of course, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders put out their own explainer video talking about, sort of the ins and outs of the shutdown, what they're doing. And then there was this, 14-hour, I think, long live stream from House Democrats that, sort of was seen as somewhat botched in some areas. So I think they're on the right track, but it's the strategy with messaging which they're questioning. But I will say a lot of Democrats say they're finally excited. They have something to, fight against with the Trump administration. It's on this issue of health care, an issue that they've won on in the past, notably in 2018 and 2006.
Eleanor, your thoughts and your observations and reporting?
I think that Republicans might be maybe more united in their messaging than Democrats have been up until this point. They're hitting the whole undocumented immigrant issue pretty hard, even though there's been some pushback on what exactly they mean when they say that Democrats want to give health care to undocumented immigrants. But there are still small differences, which I think are interesting to note, particularly at this point as we're in kind of an extended standoff. And that's specifically the Senate Republicans, it seems, might be more open to talking about these enhanced Affordable Care Act subsidies that are going to bring premiums up when they expire than the House Republicans are, in part because they're dealing with these conservatives like the House Freedom Caucus chair who are not interested in talking about those credits.
Right. And even if they are, and Republicans do say quietly and privately they are interested in talking about, they don't seem to be willing to have that conversation until the shutdown ends. They want Democrats to buckle.
That's what we saw Speaker Mike Johnson say as recently as this morning. He's been saying this is a December policy issue. It is not a November funding issue, right. October funding issue.
And it's been our sense that if there's no change in the voting patterns tomorrow, no votes over the weekend, so we've been told, and this thing could really drag on through next week.
Yeah, lawmakers have told us that they expect this to last at least a week. But, look, you have to wonder, once we see more public polling on this and also internal polling, whether that's going to pressure either side. There was a Washington Post poll released earlier today that showed that a plurality of Americans, I think 47%,
yes,
blame Trump and Republicans, smaller number.
We have that graphic. There we go,
yes,
right on the screen. As you say it, we bring it up.
Yes, there you go. 30% Democrats in Congress, 23% not sure. So, going forward, I think there's going to be a pressure campaign, not a campaign, but there's going to be pressure from the public. And also, look, we have 2 important elections coming up in Virginia and New Jersey, particularly in Virginia, where you see a lot of federal workers. They will be impacted. I am curious to see what the political consequences could be there. Yeah,
and reverberations both in Virginia, where there are a lot of federal workers, less so in New Jersey, but I think this is going to play out in both of those governor's races. Do you your sense of that, Eleanor?
It seems as if it is, and I think that you are right that it's going to take something happening outside of the Beltway to move the parties here in D.C. on getting to a funding agreement, whether that's some reason like we saw with one of the last shutdowns, which was air safety declining, or, to your point, some ramification and
some external event
races
that highlights that this shutdown is having real-world consequences, and someone's going to be held account for that. You mentioned the undocumented immigrants part. There is a whole nuance to this, and Republicans know when it comes to immigration, if you're arguing nuance, you're probably going to lose. And the nuance is, in the Biden administration, those who got asylee status, temporary protected status, or were on what is called parole could be eligible for some Medicaid. Very small percentage, but it's still real. And by asking for that to be brought back in, Democrats are, at the margins, exposed on this. And there was an exchange on CNN with Jake Tapper and the House Minority Leader about this. It was revealing. Watch it.
But they talk about the provisions, and it's right here, subtitle E, and this has to do with the repeal of health care subtitle changes, and specifically what it is. How they characterize it is you want to give health insurance to undocumented immigrants. I understand that's not really an accurate depiction, but what it does do is...
It's a lie.
Why even include that in a bill knowing that they're going to seize right upon that and use that to message? I understand that when you retake the House, you can get whatever you want passed, but at this point...
Well, what we're doing is fighting to protect the health care of the American people against the largest cut to Medicaid ever.
Classic example of a politician to try to bury the question and get on to something else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, look, I think I think Maxine Waters in particular got some heat when a conservative journalist at the Capitol asked her, about her quote. I think she, said literally, I think everyone should have health care, obviously not getting too specific, but it's something Republicans or Democrats are being pressured on the more Republicans really push this message. But I will say Republicans, the administration also getting some pushback. Earlier today, Caroline Leavitt at the White House was asked, if someone, an undocumented immigrant in the country were to go to the hospital, emergency room, would they get health care? She didn't say. She said, I'm going to leave that to the healthcare professionals and legal professionals.
Yeah. That's also trying to bury the question. Julia Manchester, Eleanor Mueller, thank you so very much for coming in.